Hello, this is Jeremy Nicholson, and this is my PowerPoint over the case study Internet Use Violations, Threats Over the World Wide Web. Things we know about this case is Roosevelt High School is a district that the majority of the students are from wealthy families. It's a very big district, and the majority of the people are pretty wealthy. Dr. Forbes has been at Roosevelt for 9 years with a Principal of the Year award. Dr. Forbes only hires the highest quality teachers. It states in there that he takes a lot of pride in who he hires. And Miss Walker was hired by Dr. Forbes to teach specialized science courses. So very difficult course that Miss Walker was teaching. Miss Walker takes great pride in maintaining a structured classroom focused strictly on learning. She was more of an old school type teacher and just very strict in her ways. The strict learning environment, along with the difficult material, created a stressful situation for the majority of the students in the class. Other things we know is parents made numerous phone calls to Dr. Forbes stating that Miss Walker's expectations were too high for their child and that they feared their child were going to make their first low grade in high school. They had many students in that class striving to be valedictorian and things like that, and they're afraid that it was going to cost them that award. Competition was very high in that class. Dr. Forbes gave Ms. Walker several techniques on how to make her classroom environment less stressful and in a more positive atmosphere. Ms. Walker refused to implement these strategies. Then during November of her second year, Ms. Walker received an email to an internet website that contained several different threats about her personal behaviors and the rigor of her classroom. Ms. Walker was extremely upset, feared for her life. She immediately contacted Dr. Forbes. Ms. Walker told Dr. Forbes that she would bet Randy Franks made the threats because he is always mouthing her behind her back and being disrespectful. Well, what we would like to know, things that are left up in the air in this case study, is Miss Walker really going to make the 3-hour drive back to her parents' house, then drive 3 hours back to school the next morning? I thought that was interesting because she had just got back from her parents' house and they said it was a 3-hour drive, and it's Sunday afternoon. So is she really that scared to go drive 3 hours all the way back and then 3 hours back the next morning? I kind of thought that was odd. Another thing is, are these threats made by a single student, or is it a group of students making the comments? Are these comments actual threats, or is it just a prank? Have the threats been made by students, or could the threats have been made by one or many of the angry parents that have called? Were the threats made at school? Will the technologists be able to track who is responsible if the threats were made away from the school? Another thing is why didn't Ms. Walker implement Dr. Forbes' teaching strategies to make her classroom environment less stressful for her students? And then how did Dr. Forbes follow up with Ms. Walker when she didn't implement the strategies? It doesn't state on there that he actually did anything for whenever she decided not to use those strategies. What were Ms. Walker's observations like? Did the threats actually say they were going to kill her, or did they just say that they wish she would disappear? Identifying the problem, the obvious problem is Ms. Walker had highly aggressive threats that were made about her personal behavior and her teaching style. Another problem is parents and students believe that Walker's class is too difficult and that she is a poor teacher. Another one is she didn't implement Dr. Forbes' strategies. Maybe if she would have implemented these strategies, then these threats may have not been made. Another problem is I feel that another one of the problems I feel is expectation of parents. I think that maybe they need to have a little bit more expectations for their students. You know, if they think the class is too hard, tell them to work a little harder. I think that has a little bit to do with this case study as well. Walker is overreacting, and she claims that she bets that it is Randy Forbes. I think this is a problem because she was panicking, and it could have been just a prank. I think she kind of overreacted a little bit there. My plan of action is the first thing I would do is I'd call Miss Walker back and tell her that I would rather not come in tomorrow to school. I think this is the best thing to do. As far as she was out of town for the weekend anyways, and therefore she can simply use that as an excuse to, as to why she was gone for Monday. I feel that Miss Walker is too upset and scared to maintain a good learning environment for the students. The only thing to make matters worse is for her to show up at school tomorrow and get upset and do something that would cause a scene and make the matters worse. I feel like giving her a little time would be good for the situation. Next thing is I'd interview the students. I think I would start interviewing students in that class that that their parents haven't called and complained about. I think the students that he hasn't heard any complaining about maybe might have heard something, or maybe have overheard somebody talk, and you never know, they may be more willing to open up and speak. After interviewing those students, I would start bringing in the students whose parents have complained. If I did find out who made the threats, then I would speak with the student about the severity of the threats. I would, after finding out what student did it, I would review and follow school policy with the disciplinary actions. And if we felt that it was a serious issue and they weren't just a prank, then we would move further. And if we had to get law enforcement involved, we would. If I felt the student or students were serious about the threats, then I would contact law enforcement. Also, if it were to happen to be a parent making the threats, then I would immediately contact the law. Once I figured out who was making the threats, I would meet with Miss Walker as the next step. If it were a student, I would meet with the student and Miss Walker together to see if they could get things resolved. I think this would be the best way, just to have everybody in the room and talk about it and just kind of get it out there. If the threats were made by a parent, then I would have the law enforcement meet with Miss Walker, providing her with the information if she wanted to prosecute the parent. Last thing I would do after finding out, saying we found out who did it and with the case, and even if we didn't find out who was making the threats, I would definitely have a meeting with Miss Walker about her teaching strategies and the way the course is going. Talk with Miss Walker and tell her that classroom needs to be difficult, but on the same token, it's good for students to get a little stressed out, but she needs to make sure that the students know she cares about them and she wants what's best for them. And then obviously speak with her about implementing the strategies that she was given, last year. How I feel like Dr. Forbes promoted the success of all students is, first and foremost, he's an experienced principal, and he won Principal of the Year. So he's established, he's liked by the parents, he takes great pride in the school district. Dr. Forbes only hires the most highly qualified teachers for Roosevelt. Miss Walker had her master's degree along with another year of postgraduate work. When parents called Dr. Forbes, he provided Miss Walker with techniques to help lower student stress levels and provide more of a positive learning environment. Another thing is Dr. Forbes realized Miss Walker wasn't emotionally ready to come to school on Monday, so he provided her with a substitute to give her a little more time to calm down. Dr. Forbes also didn't target one student in the case. He decided to start with the ones who he thought weren't upset, with Miss Walker, and speak with them first, and just try to get as much information as possible before he started speaking with the ones that were visibly upset. Throughout the investigation, Dr. Forbes maintained a normal atmosphere for all students at school. He tried to keep it as low key as he possibly could, and he made sure that the threats did not disrupt the learning environment of the school district. What was I thinking throughout the case study? I had some mixed emotions about it. The first one, as I read it first, I felt that the parents should be motivating their child to dig a little deeper and work a little harder in order to be successful in Miss Walker's class. It's a difficult class. They're extremely smart kids in that classroom, and they're having to compete against each other. And I feel like that the students were kind of being maybe didn't want to put up with that and didn't want to go through that. And I think that the parents were just trying to give them a way out. But as I read further, I learned that I learned a little more about Miss Walker. And I felt that with multiple parents calling in, it may be true that her learning environment, coupled with a difficult subject, was a problem for both students and the teacher. Dr. Forbes noticed that there was a problem, and he did something about it. However, I was shocked when Dr. Forbes gave her teaching strategies to help with the stress level of the students, and she did not implement the strategies. I don't understand that. After reading this, I immediately asked myself, what did Dr. Forbes do do then? It never says what he actually did after that. A normal principle, you would think that if a teacher wasn't doing what they were told to do, then you would do something about that. But another thing is that I was thinking is after the threats were made, I felt that Miss Walker overreacted. She said she spoke to Dr. Forbes about how they threatened to kill her, and she definitely feared for her life. But it just said, in the case study, it just said that Miss Walker. They wanted Miss Walker to just disappear. So it makes me think that Miss Walker has a little more to talk about than maybe we know. Maybe there's a little more around, because it spoke about her personal behaviors. The kids were saying stuff about her personal behaviors, and if she overreacts, that kind of makes me think that there's maybe something there. How do we demonstrate sense of integrity? Throughout the case study, Dr. Forbes didn't assume any one particular student made the threats. Dr. Forbes attempted to provide Miss Walker with techniques to provide a more positive learning environment in her class. Dr. Forbes got the call from Miss Walker about the threats. I felt that he was extremely calm and professional with her when she was panicking. Treating people fairly, Dr. Forbes provided Miss Walker with a substitute for Monday to provide her time to calm down and be ready to teach on Tuesday. Miss Walker said that Randy Franks is behind the threats, but Dr. Forbes didn't immediately call him in and assume that he was responsible. He didn't jump on board with that. He was open to everyone and fair with everybody. Dr. Forbes kept the problem as quiet as he possibly could in order to not disrupt the learning environment of the school district. This is very important, and it's his job to, when things go awry, that it's his job to keep things as calm as he possibly can. Now, I'm sure there was some whisperings and some things like that around the school, but I thought he did all he could to keep the environment as normal as possible. Dr. Forbes communicated with everyone involved with a great form of respect. Dr. Forbes found out who made the threats, and he used proper procedure by following school policy.